Welcome to Season 2 of Time and Materials, a construction-only podcast powered by livecost.com, where we sit down with interesting people doing interesting things in construction. These construction experts kindly give us their time so that you can walk away with the tools to make better day-to-day decisions in your construction career.
Paul, thank you very much for coming on. You're very welcome to the Time Materials podcast. How are you?
Thanks very much, Kieran, for inviting me on.
We usually want to get into these things, give a bit of context into the person, let people know. So tell us a bit about your own self, where did this all start out for you? How did you end up in construction, I suppose?
Well, I'm actually a chemical engineer, and my first job was actually working in manufacturing, and I just said, this isn't for me. And I had an opportunity to get into construction. It was on the kind of the mechanical electrical side of sewage and water treatment facilities. So that's when I got my first bite of construction, and I suppose it gets into your blood. Like if you enjoy seeing things being built and the fruition of your work, and you like working in teams and working with people and solving problems, and the problems come at you thick and thin, but you're trying to solve them all the time. You get a great camaraderie and a buzz and a sense of achievement, and it stayed with me ever since. And I suppose I'm fortunate enough that the industry has given me opportunities to develop my career. So I've moved off construction sites, went into the Construction Industry Federation.
Were you in the trades?
No, I'm an engineer.
Oh,
so
sorry,
I would have been working on the contract management side, project management, project engineering side of things. And then I got the opportunity to kind of move more into advocacy and policy making for the industry, which was initially in the Construction Industry Federation.
Right.
Spent a fair bit of time there initially, and then I got an opportunity to go into industrial development. But of course, we're all aware what happened back in 2008, 9, 10. And I kind of, because I'd worked in the CIF, I then had an opportunity to go in and do advocacy for the professionals on the professional side of the house, which was with Engineers Ireland. So I spent about 8 years with Engineers Ireland then. And I suppose you reach a point in your career and you go, okay, what's next for me? And I got an opportunity then to work in the Royal College of Surgeons, assisting the rollout of surgical training in Ireland, and trying to help them with their business processes and systems, and try to, I suppose, deliver training more effectively for surgery in Ireland.
Okay.
And then, of course, the opportunity came to go back to the CIF. And like, this is the great thing about construction is it is a small industry, and if you I suppose if you can show that you can get the work done, doors remain open, and it stayed open for me, and I was able to take on the role then of Director of Main Contracting. That's what I do at the moment in the CIF. And that role involves kind of the administrative leadership of the Civil Engineering Contractors Association, and also the similar type of work with the Master Builders and Contractors Association.
So
and then
for those that don't know, what's the CIF? Can you just give us a high-level overview of the CIF?
Yeah, the Construction Federation represents the construction industry, the large part of it. I mean, we represent approximately 26 billion worth of output in the construction industry, which is the predominant element of it. And we're made up of a number of different sectors within the industry, from main contracting, specialist contracting, home building, and then you get into your real specialists, right, roofing and painting and plastering and so forth. So we are a very broad church.
Would government engage with you guys then on policy change?
It would, yeah. I mean, we would be seen as a key social partner. Because we represent 144,000 direct workers and up to 240 when you include all indirect workers, we're a massive part of the economy, 6% of GDP. Yeah. So we're a stakeholder in that, and we've got, I think, a critical role in helping the government deliver on its national development plan, in trying to address climate action. I think we're real solution providers there. We are partners in delivering that, and underpinning then through infrastructure development, housing for all. And we can't have houses unless we do have that infrastructure, and that infrastructure is related to roads, public transport, bus connects corridors, active travel, community centres, schools, hospitals. If we don't have that essential infrastructure around communities, then we don't have that connectivity, and we really can't build homes. And because I'd worked in water and sewage, I understand the importance of water and sewage facilities and treatment facilities for building housing.
Yeah.
And I suppose the case in point, we had a major water cut for 36 hours in North County Dublin on the last 2 days. And you suddenly realise when you can't have a shower, you can't wash your hands, you see how critical it is. And that's the kind of the message that we try to deliver government. we need to align our infrastructure with where we want to build.
Yeah.
And that's build houses, and that's really, really critical.
Funny you say that. So I spent a fair bit of time out in Australia and in-house building as well. But what used to strike me when we used to turn up to a site, like the infrastructure was like it looked like it was been there for years, right?
Yeah.
Roads were in, railway stations where the trains were stopping at before the houses were even put into place were in place.
Yes.
And that was just to facilitate even construction workers getting to these new developments.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Schools, like completely planned way in advance. I always thought, like, how good are we in terms of planning of infrastructure pre-development?
We're getting better at it. It's slow, it's difficult, because it is a systematic issue to try and get all the various levers of government aligned to the one goal. Trying to get the infrastructure in place before you develop is a journey that we're going on. Yeah, you do see it in more mature, modern economies, but they say, well, look, let's put it in there, and that'll facilitate growth in communities, where we tend to, we'll wait till demand's there, and people could be there for 15 years living in the community with it, and they're demanding these services. So we're getting better at it, and that's what the National Development Plan is. It's about looking at where do we need to build the right type of infrastructure in the right way, in the right place. That's what it's about.
Were you in the same role when COVID came around?
I actually joined right when COVID was hitting, and the industry was at ground zero. So there was no construction industry actually operating at the time. So as they said to me when I came in, well, you can't get any lower than this, Paul.
Yeah.
So it was different.
They're like giving credit where credit's due. They did a great job in trying to keep us open, and that was the main thing. Like, we've got we work with a lot of construction companies, and they were getting the message out there that we should be open, we need to stay open. And I have to say, credit where it's due, CIF did a phenomenal job at that time in saying, listen, these are communicating with, first of all, with the industry about what was going on, and then trying to push the industry to stay open, because a lot of people knew that shutting a site down is a lot more than just shutting the site down. There's the planning and goes into shutting it down, but then getting the wheels turning and getting them sites back going was always going to be an issue. And I have to say, when I look back in the CIF, how well they communicated that and well they fought for it. Credit where credit's due. So you come in around that time, then you've been building up. So what's been the last 12 months, I suppose, look like? I mean, a lot of negativity out there. Let's put it that way. But what's been like for you in terms of dealing with the major issues that we see out there with Brexit and the war and all that type of stuff? A lot of negative press about construction in general, about where it's going to be in the next 12 months. What are you seeing on the ground?
Yeah, well, we look back first. Construction is becoming more complex. We're looking at technological disruption hitting the industry. We're looking at more complex designs. We want our buildings to perform a lot better, even from an environmental perspective. So you have a lot of those moving parts now. So that you get quite a broad brief of policy spaces, from general procurement and risk on projects, to dealing with the impact of inflation, supply chain disruption. And then we had issues that arise from the budget around concrete levy, which is coming at a time when there's already a hyperinflation in the market, and you're kind of going, this is something that could really undermine the viability of certain projects. And there's things that you kind of have long-term plans for, and there are things that come out of the blue, and you have to address them as best you can, and that. So there was things like that last year. But the great thing about constructors is that they're problem solvers, and they're dealing with this type of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And what they do is they try and sit down and look at, well, what's the impact of this on my business and the construction project, and what do we need to change it? And if you've got a good, mature, reasonable client, well, then you can solve anything. Because if you work in collaboration with the design team and you can solve these problems. And a lot of our members and contractors have really worked through this well. Don't get me wrong, a lot of balance sheets would have been squeezed in the last 12 months or 24 months on the back of the impact of COVID, on the back of Brexit, and then Ukraine came on the back of it. But the resilient industry, looking into the next 12 months, the general sentiment from a construction contractor perspective is quite positive. And the reason being is that there's a number of factors at play here. The government are committed to delivering on the NDP. We have a housing deficit. But what the government have put in place over the last number of years is starting to come above ground. It's like an iceberg slowly. You've got the LDA starting to really come into play, and starting to really build. Yeah. And there's other housing bodies that are starting to get to grips with what they have to do. So we're rising from a low base, but we're getting there. So along with that, we have a lot of infrastructure to build.
Yeah.
We've got a climate action plan that has to be delivered. It's in law. So you've got bus corridors coming downstream. You've got active travel. They're announcing 3 new elective hospitals to be built. The Department of Education have a serious capital program about building schools for all these new communities that we're going to develop under Housing for All. So the infrastructural and the public housing side is looking quite strong for the next 12 to 24 months. And don't get me wrong, there are headwinds. There are probably areas of our industry that are not going to be as successful as others. But what you'd hope is that the members will take the flexibility they've shown the last 3 years in their businesses and adapt to that. And I think that's already happened. I think you're going to see a lot of contractors that are diversifying their portfolios. And that's good. That's good business sense.
What areas do you think could be at risk?
Well, I suppose you have to look at the fundamentals of the markets at the moment in terms of interest rates. And interest rates going up shift yields. And yields then is what decides whether a commercial deal or a housing development goes ahead. And then that also then impacts on the spending power of consumers. So that side of the industry could probably see challenges. But remember, the government is ramping up public housing delivery. And it wants to work in partnership with the industry to try and deliver that. So there's opportunities there for general contractors and civil engineering contractors. The civil engineering contractors will go in and create the enabling works. The roads, the water, the sewage. They'll put that in. And then you'll have the general contractors and the master builders. They'll come in and they can build public housing. But you may also find that, and it's not necessarily an area that I know a lot about and I wouldn't get into, but the LDR engaging with my colleague, Conor O'Connell, as the housing director, around how they can work in partnership with developers who may have suitable opportunities to work with them on. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
It's good to hear, because there is a lot of negativity out there that no one really knows what the next 12, 18 months might bring. So no, it's good to hear. So I suppose reading between the lines, you don't see any pullback from government in terms of what they've committed to in terms of housing delivery, and of course that brings alongside it the infrastructure that's required, which is good to hear. When COVID hit, a lot of public contracts were obviously these fixed price contracts in particular with government. There was an issue there. I know Michael McGrath came out in, I think it was May around that time. What's been the feedback from the members on that? Well, like was it? I'm sure it was welcomed. Any help was welcomed. But I mean, what were the members? What was the reaction from the members in relation to those fixed price contracts and some of the issues that they're running into?
Yeah, I mean, we spent a significant amount of engagement with DEPR and the Office of Government Procurement on trying to find a solution that would work, because the industry relies on cash flow. That's the reality. And it was, what you're dealing with is a public body like the OGP and DEPR trying to protect the taxpayer and trying to find what's their maximum exposure. And you have an industry trying to demonstrate that if we don't have something, you're actually putting your own projects in danger. Yeah. And that was, so the message was really, how can we protect both the client side and the contractor, keep the contractor in business and get the project delivered for the state. So I think there was a common understanding that there was something that had to be done there. Now, the challenge with price variation clauses is that they might sound simple on paper, but they're actually very complex to actually calculate a specific price increase. And that's the challenge. How do you come up with something that you can use in a simple way and would provide enough recovery of loss for the contractor to keep them going? And that was the real challenge. And that's what we ended up with the Inflation Framework Agreement. And it has produced quite a novel and innovative way of addressing that. There are actually a set of workbooks that'll actually do a lot of the work for everybody, but it's understanding how they work was the challenge on both sides. So we would have done a lot of educational material for our own members on that, and the OGP then produced a number of guides and videos. So what we found the most challenging, and we did a survey of our own members, was certain contracting authorities are better at engaging with the contractors and are comfortable doing that. There are other contracting authorities that don't show that same engagement level, and that was the difficulty. So when it was brought out initially, it was to address cash flow problems. And yet we've had significant delays of engagement on the public side because of lack of understanding, a sense of, do they have a budget for it, which there was money set aside for it, and trying to get their heads around it themselves, whereas the contractors got their heads around it and started wanting to engage immediately. And that's where the challenge has been. So we've written to the Minister and we've written to the Office of Government Procurement on it, explaining to them that anything that they can do to try and facilitate greater engagement would be of benefit for themselves, to deliver their own projects and to keep the industry whole.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest fear is that contractors just won't enter fixed price.
What's happening?
Yeah.
It's happening. The feedback from my members, and not only from my members, but from contracting authorities, they're contacting me saying, how can we attract more contractors to tender for our works? And the thing is that there are better commercial opportunities in the private sector or in the export markets. And like, there's a couple of my members, I've looked at kind of a broad profile of my own members, and some of them have increased their export capacity by 20% in 2021-22, while their domestic has stayed static. So they're actually finding work in the commercial private sector and across the water or in Europe. So that means that the public works contracting process is simply just presenting too much commercial risk. It's just not viable to do the projects in such a volatile environment. And we've been trying to say that message since 2008, when the first time the public works contract came in. We've been saying the same thing. We need effective price variation clauses. Not only do they protect you, they protect us, and it helps everybody understand the risk involved. And then we wanted to deal with liability and how to identify risk fairly in a contract so it could be measured and then priced. So we're working with that. And in fairness to the OGP, they are moving on these things. But for us, it's just not fast enough. And we need the OGP resourced and able to get on with the job of trying to ensure that the NDP can be delivered, because it won't be delivered unless construction contractors are tendering for that work.
I mean, one of the kickbacks that we were hearing was that I mean, there was government came to the party essentially. They came to the party, but am I right in saying it was contracts? They were happy to come to the party on inflation. I think it was up to 2021. But the problem was a lot of these tenders were actually priced back in say 2019, and the rate of inflation and the money lost was far greater. I mean, have you seen any contractors actually get into trouble based on these projects?
Well, look, we had Roadbridge obviously going to the wall last year. But if you look at other contractors that have left the Balfour Meaty left the market last year solely because of the public works contract. They said, that's it. We know that there are contracting authorities that can't attract international contractors in to deliver on major infrastructure projects because they just won't touch that public works contract. And so we know there's a couple of, unfortunately, other contractors that went on the last week or so. And that's the type of message we're trying to tell government. You can't go in and say this contract or that contract is going to go bust. Well, we'll never know that because they just will not share that commercial information with you because they won't be able to win work, because it could take one good job for them to get back in the black. And so it's a hidden thing. And we've been expressing our worries that the financial stress from Brexit, COVID and then the Ukraine war was really damaging the supply chain. And the supply chain is critical for the government to deliver on the NDP. And that's it. Like, they need to see us. Like, but statistics, like I've said, 26 billion, 6%, they must see us as a business sector in our own right. Similar to, say, ICT, similar to manufacturing, pharmaceuticals. And ultimately, all those business sectors, they depend on us to allow themselves to grow because we build their facilities. That's what people don't think about. It's not just houses out there and extensions. We're building all that critical infrastructure that allows the economy to grow. And the thing is, if we don't, those industries have sustainable profits. And nobody seems to attack Apple for doing what they do because it allows them to invest again in the next product. So what we're kind of saying is that if you create a partnership approach to construction and you allow contractors to earn sustainable profit margins, they reinvest then in their people, their business processes and their systems and the technology. And it's that new technology like modern methods construction or green public procurement. They will be much more likely to invest in that because they're actually earning a sustainable profit margin. And if you build then a decent pipeline of work, which is the NDP, is designed to do that, that gives them business certainty. And every business needs business certainty. When Apple decide they want to build 1 million phones, they know that there's a demand for it. And that feeds down to the supply chains. So if the government can set, we're going to do this, and we're going to hit construction and this, well then contractors are going, I'm earning a sustainable profit margin, I can see a supply of work coming down that can get me through, well then I'm going to invest. That becomes more productive, you're raising quality, you're starting to use technology like building information management systems, and that becomes better at delivering on more environmentally higher performing environmental buildings. And that's what we want. We all want to go there.
When you're in chatting with your clients, essentially, your CIF members, I mean, what are you hearing out there? Like, what are the biggest concerns contractors have at the moment?
Yeah, like, they're quite busy, and that's good. But at the same time, they're still managing that whole cost increase issue and try to trying to tender in that environment is very, very challenging unless you've got a client willing to look at that risk and decide what's the best way we can measure it so that nobody is managing unsustainable risk. That's it. You've got to manage those supply chain disruptions. What you're doing, if something on site is not delivered, it's not like you can get it in the past within the next week. Sometimes it's taking a month to get even a small part to allow the next job to go ahead. So that's delay on projects. So then you need a very flexible client that will say, right, can we come up with a solution very quickly to solve this? Maybe we need to change the piece of equipment or change the way we're building it. Yeah. So there are challenges from ours. We obviously are trying to build the profile of the industry to attract more talent into it and a diversified talent.
How would you go about that?
So CIF have a careers campaign. We're about to launch, and it's my fellow colleague Dermot Carey. He's Director of Health and Safety and Education and Training, looks a lot at this idea, and he's running that campaign to try and attract more people into the industry. So we're going to run that TikTok, and the idea is to get young people on camera speaking to young people and saying, this is what we do, this is what I do every day, this is the type of infrastructure I'm building to the benefit of society. And it's actually a real rewarding career, but it's a career for life because it's got such a vast, diverse level of career paths. Like, you could start as a craftsperson and be the CEO. There's very few industries that allow that to happen.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I always, so I'm a carpenter by trade, and I think one of the things that gets missed there, I would be an advocate for getting into a trade for many reasons. One, it allowed me to travel, which broadened my whole and really set the foundations of a career.
Yeah.
But it allows you to go into other areas of construction that's not quite trade-based, where, for example, in a technology company that wants to sell into construction, they would be always and bite the hand off someone that has great construction knowledge. So the career opportunities, I feel, is that's one piece that's missed out actually, is say, well, okay, come in and serve your apprenticeship, that's the 4 years. You might want to go on site for another year just to sharpen up and become a qualified tradesman. Now you're off you go, do your travel, but then the opportunities that could be on top of that in not just, I don't think any young kid at the moment wants to be knee deep in wet puddles and swinging hammers on the roof and all that, because that's, no one really wants to do that. But I think if we sort of twist it the other way and say, well, that's going to get you qualified, that's going to give you the ability to travel, that's going to give you the ability to get into different areas. I think if we change the narrative on it, and it's not just about, this will get you a qualification, go and work on that side up the road. It's pretty cold now, by the way, and it's dark for 3 or 4 months of the year, but up you go. It's a difficult sell, isn't it?
It is, and it's up to us to come to some way of showing the industry that it's not just about that. And you're right. Like, if you start, I'll just take my own brother, who was a Sparks, worked for years and then decided I'm going back to college. He went back and became an engineer, and he's working now for a large M&E project management company, construction contractor, and on the PM, and he's doing great. But he started that, so he's come from that sites. So you don't have to stay on the sites, but we also have to remember that the industry is changing. It's not as labour intensive on site, and when we start to look at modern methods of construction and off-site manufacturing, you're into a wholly different environment. You're working mostly in a factory in a clean environment, and then you might be down on site to assemble, and you're in completely different. So technology and the way we construct is changing. So it's not the filthy, dirty sites as they were in the past. And most contractors of good contractors, like the master builders and contractors and the civil, they'll have a range of facilities on their sites that would make it a bit more comfortable. It's not the same type of industry. And like my colleague Sean Downey, director of special contract, he works on that modern methods construction and BIM and all that digital, and he's helping to try and get that message across and to drive that adoption of that, because it does make the industry a lot cleaner and a lot more productive. So, but you're right, there are great opportunities there, and like as I said, I moved out of construction, went into the RCSI to do business excellence, and then back into construction again. And if you're willing to learn, if you like it is hard work. Yeah. But I mean, that's what you get the satisfaction out of. On a Friday evening, and you're having a few pints with your work colleagues, you're feeling good. You've got a sense of achievement. You don't often get that stuck in an office punching numbers all day long.
Yeah, it definitely feels like as an industry as a whole that we have to move on. I mean, we had Jerry McCaughey on there just in the last episode, and Jerry's offsite modular construction companies. Integra is still here in Monaghan, where they have the design team, the engineering team here in Monaghan, but they're actually manufacturing homes in California, right? You think about that for a second, it's bonkers, right?
Yeah.
Designed home here, all the engineering done here, the homes are being built and they're pumping out homes. It's just it baffles me how we're not pumping homes out here in the same method. So what you guys are trying to do, but makes a ton of sense to me, especially when we're in the housing crisis. But what Jerry's point was always being is that the education piece here, people don't want to know, they don't want to educate themselves. There's a big resistance, and his thing was, I'd encourage anyone that's listening here to go back and listen to that episode. It was really good, by the way, in terms of banging his head against the wall, trying to educate a market into why this is a better way to build, and trying to be, you'd imagine one of the points he was making is, if you get a kid, and let's say coming out of college or whatever it might be, they're used to having iPads, phones, they deal with technology on a day-to-day basis, and then they go into a role where they're saying, well, we don't deal with any of that, we actually work pretty much the way we worked 20 years ago. I mean, it just feels like at a top level we've got to move. The answer is how.
Yeah, and like construction contractors bring that knowledge and expertise and how this can be done, and they want to be more efficient on site and contractors want to be off site as soon as possible, because that's efficient and it's much more profitable. They don't want to be there fighting all the day long, and that's what off-site brings in modern methods construction. But what we have to do is convince clients and their design teams to move in that direction, because you can't use modern methods construction in an efficient way and a successful way unless you look at lean construction. You have to take a lean approach. What's the value stream and how I build? What's my business model? And how do you link that then with the design team's vision of how they want to build? And it's design team and client that need to make that decision of, if we're going to go with modern methods construction off-site, we need to build it in there and make that decision. So what do they need to know? Well, their funders and investors need to understand that the risk is starting to fall in terms of adoption of these new technologies. And are they willing to take that, have that risk appetite? Because if they don't move like this, we're not going to start achieving our environmental goals and getting that really good performance on our buildings. We have to start looking in that direction. And that's about us continuing to engage as contractors and construction and educate them. And it's the CIF, which, as I said, is Sean is trying to do. And we've got a couple of really good initiatives that we're working in partnership with the government on. And in fairness, the government are trying to drive productivity in the industry and support us through a centre of excellence that's made up of 3 parts. Really, it's about modern methods construction off-site, but it's also about digital adoption, like BIM, and then you've got your technology research centre as well. So there are components now to try and underpin construction, help us to move to there.
What's the goal of that centre? Like who is that built for? Is it an industry place where contractors can go and learn, or is it more about educating the market as a whole? Let's say.
Well, there's 3. One of the strands, say, digital adoption, which is chaired by the past president of the CIF, Pat Lucy, an ex-CEO of CISC. The whole idea there is to build skills from the ground up. So rather than having a second academic institution providing courses, what we're trying to understand is, what do construction contractors need to do, what they need to understand to adopt digital adoption into their business. And that starts at 2 things. It's giving them the capabilities they need the time to assess their business, because we need to move away from allowing technology drive the business. Technology is just a tool that helps our business to deliver more efficiency, more effectively, and a better margin. Yeah. So it's getting them to think strategically about their business and how they can use the technology. And then when they see that, then you teach them the skills and actually how to use the technology once they bolt it into their value chain. Yeah. So that's what the whole digital project is about.
Yeah, so on a day-to-day, before we come in here and do this, like, my day job is obviously very, very embedded in technology. We look at this in terms of people, process, and we have our old triangle type of thing where we say people, process, and technology is the last thing we look at. So when a company would come and talk to us, for example, we'd say, right, tell us about the company, what sort of people have you got involved, what's the process, do you have a process? I mean, if you don't, there's no technology in the world really that's going to help you. Yeah. So we try and understand those 2 things first, and then technology is just the enabler. Yeah. So, doing that process you do today with six different people, and some of it's paper-based, and some of it's in spreadsheets, and some of it's in email and all that type of stuff. If we bring that into one place, well, there's clear ROI on what we can do.
That's the whole approach of the Centre of Excellence, is to bring industry, academia and government together to work in partnership and transform the industry for the better.
Yeah, one of the things that we would see on the day, and we do a lot of internal R&D in our own company on this exact subject, but when we look at Centre of Excellence and when we look at anything government funded, what we find is that it can be targeted towards the top end of the market. So you talk about, you mentioned CISCs and Mercury's and these guys, and that's great. They have R&D departments, and they have a will and a want to change, right, which is a great start. But what we've looked at and said, well, hang on a second, if these guys go that way on a digital journey, and they digitise their full process, and they leave the subcontractors behind, well, then that's not going to work, right? So everybody needs to go. So I suppose a question would be, is there internal discussions about how we can bring the smaller companies on this journey? Because let's be honest, the majority of the market is the smaller contractor.
Yeah, it is a very fragmented market. And once you get below, say, the top 50, you're then into companies that might have less than 50, and then you're getting into less than 10 employees. And that's the critical point that we're making, is that it's the whole supply chain has to move, and you can't. That's the danger of mandates. You know, if the industry's not ready to move, you've made a mandate and you can't get people to do the work. And some may move quicker than others, but they don't have the scalability to build everything.
Yeah.
So you're dead right. So that is the purpose of what we're trying to do here. And I know my colleague Sean Downey is really driving that. And you know, you have PJ Rudden, who's chairing the Digital Adoption and Innovation Group, and his whole focus is raise all the boats. You know, let's get down to grassroots here. Yeah. And he's there is an SME group that is trying to look at what do SMEs know and not know. And there's an assumption that they just get 4, 5, and 6 of BIM. And I mean, I know I have a sense of BIM, but I'm not an expert in BIM. So a CEO running a company who's going to be making those decisions of where they're going to invest in technology over 10 years need to understand what BIM is and how it can impact on their business. But they also need to understand how their business is working in the first place.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we agree. And one thing that we look at, so we've got customers here. I suppose the UK, which we would travel fair bit of travel to the UK, but we'd be still talking on the ground with a lot of customers in Australia, New Zealand. And one of the things that we see, even at that level, that SME level of, as you say, the 1 to 10, the 10 to 50 type range, is digital technology doesn't equal BIM. And a lot of time when we look at in the Irish narrative, every event we go to, it's like it's so BIM focused. And the reality is these guys in them types of businesses, it doesn't have a direct impact on the bottom line. Therefore, what is the incentive for these guys to digitise or even go and educate on BIM? So it's got to be digital impact, digital transformation that actually has an impact or an ROI on their bottom line, and then transform. I mean, that's one of the things we're seeing.
It has to have a commercial return for both players. It has to work for the client, and it has to work for the contractor, and it has to work for the project. Some projects don't need BIM, and you're wasting money. There's no need for it. Like a pharmaceutical plant, they justified doing it in BIM because they need to know exactly where every valve is. But does a road need BIM? Does a bus corridor need to use BIM?
I mean, with the civils guys, Paul, I mean, what's the sort of adoption rate in terms of technology across, let's say, this general civil contractors? Are you seeing it? Is it high? Are they reluctant to change?
No, I mean, civil engineering contractors see themselves as a service provider for the country. They're very unique in their outlook of what they do. They're very focused on delivering quality assets. That's what they want. So they're always looking at what new technologies can they bring to the sites. But remember, civil engineering, by its very nature, is outdoor. It usually involves a lot of earth moving, which is dealing with very complex ground conditions to stabilisation. So they're looking at different technologies that help them to do that. They're looking at how do I install pipes in a more efficient way. So you're looking at different types of equipment. You're looking at different ways of laying asphalt, for example, and a more efficient way, or scraping roads and stuff like that. So they're also looking at byproducts. How can we reuse what we're using on site? I mean, that is innovation. Why are we transporting good crushed concrete 50 miles down the road for disposal when if we had a more efficient standard system and certification system in Ireland, we could actually reuse it, and that means saving on emissions, saving on transport, reducing the cost for the client and the public client as well. So they're always looking at what way to do it. So technology comes in different forms. It doesn't have to be a computer. It can be technology is how you build. If you can do it better and more efficiently, and you do it off site, then great. If you bring on precast manholes that have been designed into the system at the start, it means you become more efficient. You're not having to shutter and put rebar in and do all that. If you can get floating rafts that are pre-matched off site and they come on, you can do it much, much quicker rather than having to do the usual excavation works and so forth and the on-site pours.
Yeah. we've gone down a bit of a technology rabbit hole there, but it's good. It's good. Always a subject of interest to me, anyway. Magic ball, hard question, probably in front of you, but like, what does the next 18 months look like for the Irish construction industry?
I think we're always going to have headwinds in construction. It's just the nature of the game, and there's no point in that. But we're a resilient industry and we're adaptable. I think that based on the infrastructural deficits that need to be closed in this country, our move towards climate action, the necessity to address our environmental challenges on some of our buildings, it will create a, maybe not as buoyant as it could have been 2 years ago before the war in Ukraine and so forth, but certainly a buoyant enough industry to keep our members busy and working well and attractive for people who want careers and opportunities. And I'll go back to that diversity thing. It's that new technologies. You know, we're going to have to bring in people not from the normal backgrounds. You know, we're going to have to bring in more females and people outside of Irish culture into our industry to help us adapt these new technologies. That's the reality. So I think it's exciting, and I think, you know, there's been announced there, as I said, 3 new elective hospitals. We've got a major capital program for schools. We'll have bus connects corridors that are going to start being built next year. Active travel. We've got major infrastructural deficits around sewage and water. Energy projects that are going to come on stream. We've got to upgrade a lot of like, the reality is that your companies will still need office space, but in a different way. So you'll probably see repurposing of buildings. You're probably going to see a lot of retrofitting to bring existing stock up to a higher rating, because if you're an investor and you want to rent, you want your product to be attractive to people who want to lower their operational costs. So there's probably going to be a lot of work there. So, and you've got FDI. We've got to remember that Ireland is now the only common law English-speaking country within the EU, and we're a bridge between America and a lot of other places. And they see us as a very safe political place to actually put their business. And now that Brexit's happened and the UK have gone the direction where they are, we're getting a huge tailspin of investment in here in Ireland across commercial manufacturing. And look, ICT is having its blip, but we all need technology. It's just trying to reorientate where the next value is. And ICT moves quick. It changes, it sees the new value stream, and then it goes for it, and suddenly you'll see it getting over fast. So it might shift to other areas where we'll see more commercial investment. So on the broadly speaking, and everything is you know, life is full of unforeseens or unknown unknowns. But I would say, from even talking to my own members, that they'd be cautiously confident in terms of where we're going, because that's their nature. But I think, you know, we're in a good place. The economy is still going to grow small, but construction is a key element in it that needs to be delivering on infrastructure and public housing as well. So yeah, relatively positive.
And if anyone wants to learn more about the CIF or membership of the CIF, where would they find a bit more about that, and maybe if they want to connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look on the website and you'll get our contact numbers and give us a shout, or, you know, I don't want to put my number out on the thing, because everybody will be ringing me, but certainly the website is the best direction to go in terms of getting contact details, and one of our membership team then can get back in touch.
Paul, thanks for coming in. I know it's dinner time, so appreciate you coming in.
No, and thanks for having me. It's been very enjoyable. And again, I didn't get a chance to thank you for the recognition at the start in terms of the work we did. I think the Health and Safety Committee and the members there, and particularly the chair of the Health and Safety Committee, Frank Kelly, who's the current president of the CIF, done incredible work, working together in partnership as colleagues to show that the industry is serious. We're a serious operator. We developed a SOP that was used across the world. You know, we mean business, and we're here to work in partnership. I think that's really important.
We'll leave it on that one. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Time and Materials is brought to you by LiveCost, the construction software fully designed to manage your construction financial forecasts. Visit livecost.com to take a product tour, or reach out to our team of construction cost experts to transform your project profits. Any links mentioned during this episode, including speaker profiles or any other resources, are available on the podcast show notes. Your feedback is also welcome. We would really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review, or email your comments, guest suggestions to hello@timeandmaterials.com. Finally, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm your host, Kieran Brennan.